Hello and welcome. I'm Robbie.
And I'm Jay.
And you're joining us for episode 10 of Generations Apart. We made it 10 episodes in. The
Double
podcast.
Figures, Robbie.
I know. The podcast where we chat about gaming technology across the generations, sharing our perspectives on the past and our excitement for the future. On today's episode, we're talking about our experience setting up streaming on Twitch through our equipment, our past of streaming, if we've got a history of it, and how we're enjoying it doing it now. So, here we go. Before we get into that, though, Jay, what's piqued your interest this week on the 10th episode? Better be special.
Oh, you did put that pressure on me now. I wasn't planning that when I went into this. So I'm going to be really creative and really original, Robbie, because we've never talked about this subject before. I'm going to talk to you about generative AI.
Shocker.
And yet another development. This week, it's come from Adobe. So they had their big sort of annual summit, where they announce all the kind of roadmaps for their new products, and where all the ones we all know and love, Photoshop, InDesign, etc., and all the good stuff that's come into those, as well as a whole load of new and interesting stuff. And this time, and all the attention from this summit has gone, as you might expect, to generative AI. And specifically, what piqued my interest was the announcement of Adobe Firefly. So Adobe Firefly is Adobe's answer to Stable Diffusion, Midjourney, these AI image generation platforms. It's fascinating because it's Adobe's take on it with a twist. Now, from what I can tell, a few things to note on this. First of all, by their own admission, it's not yet as good as Stable Diffusion or Midjourney. Those platforms have been trained on many more pictures. And from what I can tell, and what we've heard recently in the press, that perhaps some of those pictures had questionable copyright infringement situations to deal with, something that Adobe are very clear that they don't want to get caught up with. And what they're basically trying to create here is, if you want, for a better word, the honest image generation platform. So they are training their AI solely on their stock library, of which they have a vast stock library, and any publicly available images that are free of any kind of IP or copyright claims.
That's clever. That's a good idea.
It is really clever. So first of all, you're going to get a platform that you can more reliably use for your artwork. So if you're into the Adobe system and you're using Photoshop and other tools, you can bring these images in, you can use them freely and know that you're safe in the knowledge that you're not going to get caught out for infringing copyright. Now, that's obviously, as someone who professionally does this stuff, is very powerful. Another thing that I thought was really interesting is that they're also looking to allow users, specifically artists, that would make sense, to train the AI model and create styles that other people can effectively license. So if you wanted to commission me to do a piece of art, you could do that. You could pay me. I'm not an artist, but imagine I was. You could pay me for my artwork. If you wanted to use my style and then AI as a complement to generate art that looks like my work, Adobe's going to allow you to do that and to charge for the privilege. So you can get something that looks like my work without me having to handcraft it for you, because I've trained a model based on my pre-existing artwork in order that the AI can generate art like me, which I think is really interesting from a sort of image creator's perspective, giving them that capability, almost a new revenue stream in the wake of AI, perhaps taking from them in other areas. They can train a model and sort of sell it as their own. The other thing that they're looking at, and it's on screen now for those who are watching, is that they're also dabbling with text generation and creative text using AI. That's something that most of these platforms just simply don't handle. Whereas obviously Adobe have got a huge stock library of fonts as well as artwork, and they're bringing that generative AI to the fonts to allow you to create your fonts with a specific style, look, or feel. So it just really interests me that
that's very cool. I think that's the thing that interests me more out of all of this. The text generation is amazing. Yeah,
it's really good, isn't it?
So it's not just like a standard font. These are like artistically, procedurally generated. Like I saw one before that was a piece of broccoli that was a really fanciful piece of broccoli shaped as a W. And you can do like whole sentences.
Fancy broccoli. That's what Adobe Firefly is bringing you.
Who doesn't want that?
but I think it's what really interests me is where this then goes from Adobe's perspective, because they also touch on at the end vector recoloring. Inevitably, you're going to see this move into the content-aware fill space, which has been a very powerful tool in Adobe Photoshop for quite a while now. The ability to highlight a part of your image and then just have Photoshop magically remove it. Now it's going to be able to do that in an even more creative way. So it was inevitable. Of course, Adobe were going to do this. They had to respond. But I think it's really fascinating to see. And I think this Firefly tool, for me, I think I would use it in better conscience, knowing that the images that are being generated are being done lawfully. That's obviously a concern. It won't bother everyone. That's fine. I'm not saying you should or shouldn't be bothered by it. And interesting, we'll post it in the show notes for anyone who wants to go and have a look, and it'll be in the notes below the video if you're watching on YouTube. But definitely go and check out the video that we're sharing here, where it's like a Photoshop trainer that I follow on YouTube. He's just talking about the benefits. He shows the differences, and he even does some sample generations from both Firefly and also from I think it's Midjourney that he uses, or Stable Diffusion. And honestly, they're different, but they're both equally good. You're looking at them right now, in fact, for those who are watching on video. So I would absolutely encourage you to go and spend 10 or 15 minutes just checking it out, hear what he's got to say about Firefly. You can go and look on Adobe's website as well and have a look at all of this. But so yet again, generative AI is stealing my piqued interest slot for this week.
Of course. How could it not? It's the hot topic at the moment. I really like this approach, though. I think we spoke about it on our second episode, that there is some contention around AI generated images because of the copyright issues or potential copyright issues. I still think it's kind of outstanding what the decision is on that. But not only making it on a royalty free or kind of stuff that they already own, images they already own, but an extra revenue stream for creators. So it's not just, we're not going to steal your work, it's we're also going to provide you an opportunity to use this to make more money. It's such a really good approach, and I think for creators, just a massive win for them.
Absolutely. I think that's what they've needed. That's been the biggest concern, and this won't eradicate all those concerns, because it only generates the money if someone uses the paid services. We know there's a whole load of people out there who like to dodge that.
Yeah.
And we'll obviously go for the free solution. But yeah, really interesting. And I'm going to be really naughty before I ask you what piqued your interest. And just very quickly, it's kind of linked to this, call out something else that I saw today,
a double,
which is another fun video on YouTube. I can post it in the show links if you think it's necessary. But it was a guy using ChatGPT to generate the prompts for Midjourney version 5.
Oh yeah.
So, which is the latest version. So he effectively took all the how-to material from Midjourney. He fed it into ChatGPT as kind of like its knowledge base and said, this is what I need you to learn and understand. And then he said, now that you understand how to generate a prompt, he would give it like 1 or 2 lines or 1 or 2 words, and it would then go and create these amazingly detailed prompts, which would include much more articulate text on what the prompt should look like, the picture or the visual should be. It would wrap in all the kind of camera sensors, the camera lens, setups, the kind of look and feel, all the key messages and all the key tags you need to generate really good quality AI generated art. And I think it was fascinating that he trained ChatGPT in order to get ChatGPT to write him better prompts for Midjourney. So he's teaching one AI how to generate prompts for another. And I just thought that was really funny. It made me laugh. We're going full circle now, and AI is prompting other AI to produce more human-free content. But
I have seen stuff like that before, where you get other tools to feed into prompts to other tools as well. It's a good way of doing it, just because the models know what to ask.
Makes a lot of sense.
It does.
I mean, and actually, what it was generating, some of the outputs of the artwork were absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
And Midjourney V5 is just something else. Absolutely brilliant. It's not available to us mere mortals. You've got to pay for access to Midjourney V5.
Oh, do you? Interesting.
But still very, very good. Robbie, what about you? What piqued your interest?
My interest
Can you save us from the Gen AI?
I can actually. I was very tempted to do a Gen AI, and maybe I'll do a you and do it like a special kind of other drop on Gen AI. Actually, just on that, this week I saw a LinkedIn post that had a list of just the generation AI tools that have been released this week, and there was a list of about 20, all doing different things. So it's a wild time for generation AI. But today,
You just call it Generation AI.
yeah,
You're mixing it up with
Gen
our very
AI,
creative
AI
and
Gen.
nearly very similar podcast title.
oh yeah, generations of AI apart.
It's becoming Generations AI, isn't it? The way we're going.
It is a bit. It is a bit.
Save us from the AI, then, Robbie. What was it? What piqued your interest?
So this week I saw a really cool smartwatch, and it was because Marques Brownlee, MKBHD, posted about it on social media, and I saw it as a short. So I brought it up on stream for anyone who's watching it on YouTube. But essentially, it's a smartwatch that houses 2 earbuds inside it. So it just looks like a normal smartwatch made by Huawei. And you press a button and it opens it up, and 2 earbuds appear, and you can use them as kind of earbuds to listen to music to. And it connects to the watch. It charges in the watch. It actually looks fairly slimline for housing different two earbuds as well. But I just thought it was a really cool new tech development from Huawei that you can have earbuds that are with you at all times because they're attached to your watch. I've heard that the audio quality is not the best. They are absolutely tiny earbuds, so you can imagine that there are issues. Though an additional cool feature I saw was that because each earbud is exactly the same, completely identical, you can put them in either ear, and the way to calibrate them is once they're in your ear, you can give a quick nod and it can tell which ear the earbud is in. How wild is that?
That's crazy.
But yeah,
what a bad time for that to be announced just weeks after you bought your Apple Watch.
nah. I
Darn
mean,
it! I should have waited.
It's cool, but I wouldn't go for it. Apparently, the watch has like a battery of a couple of weeks, I think, but it reduces to 3 days if you're charging your earbuds in there. So
still 3 days is more than your average Apple Watch. And even the Ultra just about stretches 3 days if you're lucky. So so.
Definitely appealing, but there are ups and downs of Huawei as well. I think there are certain features and services that you can't get through it, so it'd be interesting to see how that actually impacts the usage of the watch.
Will it only connect with, I'm going to butcher the pronunciation, Huawei phones, or will it connect to any Android device or any iPhone?
Android. Should be Android, yeah. I pulled up the website on the side, but I haven't looked into it that much, but I think it is Android. Sorry?
Not compatible with iPhone?
Good question. It probably is compatible with iPhone. The thing is with Huawei, there's quite a lot of services that phones are not allowed to use anymore with Huawei. I think, for example, Google and the Google Play Store, for example. I don't think you can get that anymore on Huawei phones. So there are limitations, obviously, of using something.
Is that a trust issue?
Yes, yeah, there's a bit of a... It's a whole thing.
Fair enough. And final question on the watch price. Do they indicate price point, or is it too early for that?
I think it's too early. I think it might be a concept at the moment. I'd love to see a full video on it, but here we go. $429 USD is what it's priced at.
So sort of the higher end for your average Apple Watch, but way below the Ultra then.
Yeah, well, that's probably about the price of an Apple Watch at the moment, isn't it? USD, if you mentioned.
Yeah, but if you went for the higher end device, because there's a range, isn't there? And there's they're always selling the slightly older version, and then there's the smaller and the larger screen size. True. So I guess that's the higher end. But if you combine that with then the $150-ish price point for a pair of AirPods,
yeah,
and they're all in one device.
Bargain.
Maybe that's worth it. No, yeah. I wouldn't buy them, but.
Yeah, I know. It's not Apple for one.
It's the sort of thing where I love this stuff and I get excited about this tech, and then I'm really honest with myself and go, but I'm not leaving the Apple ecosystem.
Yeah.
I like your product, but it's a no from me. But yeah, no, it's cool.
Yeah, thought that was a cool little thing to spot in my interest this week.
I like it.
Cool. So, shall we chat about streaming on Twitch? So, coming at this from an absolute newbie from my side, I know you've had quite a bit more experience in it. So why don't we start with where you started streaming? It was kind of long before me.
Yeah, okay, cool. So I'm apologies from a video perspective if you can see me looking down at regular points here, but I made some notes so that I wouldn't forget some of the key things that I wanted to remember to talk about. Obviously, if you're listening on all good podcast services, this is going to be absolutely You'll be oblivious to it. So I think my kind of adventure into streaming started somewhere around 2013, 2014. I can't quite remember exactly. And I remember at the time I was watching an early streamer called Castro. And Castro has gone on to become very big in the streaming space, well-known FIFA streamer, and now sort of broadened his horizons to football in general. But I was watching him back when he first started streaming, and he was in his parents' his bedroom at his parents' house, with a ropey bit of green cloth behind him to create the green screen. And he had a bit of a gimmick. He was very good. He was very annoying, actually. I'll be brutally honest. When I first started watching him, but he was annoyingly watchable, and he had these annoying catchphrases. I think it was something like green eggs and ham and a slide of bacon, baby, or something weird like that. Every time someone like subscribed or did an action, so he was saying it all the time. And then if he did something celebratory, he had this gimmick where he'd run and jump into his green screen, basically crash into his wardrobe, pull the green screen down, and then have to repair his stream. It was a bit weird, but he had a personality. And I remember watching him and thinking, okay, this guy's interesting. I wonder, what is this actually worth? What's he making on this? And I don't know if you know this, but at the time, and things have moved on incredibly since then, you really only had the Twitch subscription as a way to make money from Twitch, and everything else was kind of handled outside of Twitch on sort of like donation platforms.
Yeah.
And I remember watching for about an hour. I was at work at the time. Whoops, naughty. But I was watching it while I was working, and I was clocking him for an hour, and I just made a mental note of how many times someone subscribed in that hour. And this was fairly early on in even his career. He was getting about 400 to 500 viewers at any given time. And he got about 100 subscribers in this hour that I watched him. And I remember thinking, wow, okay, well, what does he make for that? I went and had a look. And at the time, Twitch subscription was about £5. And half of that revenue went to Twitch and half it went to the user.
Yeah.
So he made in that hour circa £250 just on Twitch subs.
Yeah.
I also kept a rough tally, and it was very rough, of the donations he received. And he made about $800 in donations. Wow. So all in, there or thereabouts, a little over $1,000. Let's say I'm going to use dollars because that's most of what was going on screen. And I remember thinking, God, he's done that in an hour, and he used to stream for like 4 or 5 hours at a time. And that was what first of all got me thinking, this could be interesting. Should I? How do you do this? Like, what do you need to be a streamer? He was a former IT service desk analyst or something. That's what he did. He was in IT. So mildly technical, probably, or semi-reasonably technical, and he went and learned this stuff and set himself up. Fast forward to now, he gets circa 10 to sort of 12,000 viewers at any given time. He's moved house 4 or 5 times, from what I can tell. I kind of dip in and out of his stream over the years, and he's making a killing, like all these big streamers are now, making money. And I'm filled with huge regret for not trying harder in 2013. But
you were missing the cupboard to run into with your green screen.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I should crash into all of my collectibles behind me. That would be my gimmick. But
I think people would pay to see that.
I started to look into it, and my sort of setup at the time, I had a fairly high-powered MacBook, but no Windows PC. I wanted to be able to stream modern consoles, but also potentially hook up some retro ones. And I'm always all about versatility. So I bought at the time, and I'll get just for those on camera, I've got it here. It's a little box called the Game Capture HD. It's by Elgato. I'll try and get that to focus. There we go. And the Elgato Game Capture HD effectively has a HDMI in on one end and an AV in at the same end. So you can put your HDMI devices in, which at the time would have been, would it be 360? Maybe it would have been Xbox One. Xbox One. I'm gonna guess it was Xbox One.
Yeah, it would have been.
And also the AV in, which came with a multitude of connectors, which would allow you to hook up older devices that use sort of component connections or composite connections. And then it had a HDMI out and a simple USB port. I think that's a mini USB, not micro. That's how far back it goes. And that was used to power it. So that was kind of the setup. I opted not to go for the more popular at the time and slightly newer HD60, still doing the rounds now. Perfectly capable external streaming card, but it's HDMI only. And I wanted the versatility, so I bought the Game Capture HD.
Especially with your retro games. You can capture them as well.
Yeah, exactly, that was it, yeah. I already had a mic, which I was using at the time, which is the Yeti that I still have today. Still works very well. I use it for streaming even now because it's a perfectly competent microphone that's sort of in the region of about £100. I had no lights specifically at the time, although I've upgraded those since, and I was using Logitech C920 webcam. So decent at the time, going back sort of like 10-ish years nearly, but by no means up to speed with what modern streamers are doing, and we can come on to that shortly. And honestly, that broadly worked. I used OBS, native OBS, that was all there was at the time, but it was on Mac, so it was a little bit limited. So a lot of the kind of external mods that you had to do to get kind of extra overlays into your stream or integrations to sort of be able to bring up custom text and things like that, you couldn't do on a Mac because they were all designed for Windows. So I was very restricted in terms of what I could do. I did dabble with the idea of, as we touched on in a previous episode, boot camping the Mac and doing it that way, but I steered clear in the end. And it broadly worked. A couple of challenges I found. First of all, my internet service provider was pretty rubbish back then. I was getting less than 5 meg up, about 20 meg down. Wasn't good connectivity, and the upspeed was really what killed me because I just couldn't get a sort of stable feed. The other problem was that the Mac, through with the game capture card connected through USB and everything else it was being asked to do, it wasn't able to keep a stable frame rate.
Really?
So I ended up, I would start streaming, it would run okay for a little while, and then I'd start to run into problems. I mean, we still experience those inconsistencies even now.
I was going to say, I get that a lot.
They were much worse then and harder to problem solve because this stuff just wasn't as readily available. But it was a really fascinating time. I really enjoyed it. To be honest, once I'd got it all set up and I started to come into some of these problems, I knew that investing in new equipment or possibly moving to Windows was the only real way I was going to advance it.
Yeah.
And I'd
come to the dark side.
The dark side. I'd proved the point. I'd set it up, and like many of my hobbies, once I'd proved the point and become sort of reasonably good at it, reasonably knowledgeable, and that was good enough for me, and I moved on to another hobby. So I parked it basically for quite a few years. So that was kind of my first experience of streaming, both watching and then I guess trying to get into it.
What games were you doing back then?
Oh man. I mean, I wasn't really playing anything. I didn't stream regularly enough to sort of call myself a FIFA streamer or a COD streamer or whatever was popular then. I was just really playing whatever, a bit like I do now, whatever took my fancy. So I was hopping around a lot.
Did you do any of the retro stuff?
Streams I did. What? Sorry.
Did you do any retro stuff?
I think we did. I think I did a couple of streams. More retro stuff came a little bit later on. So there's kind of 3 stages to my streaming experience, and that came more in the second stage in the end. So I sort of bought the right equipment to be ready to do it, but never actually got around to doing the retro stuff. So yeah, not in that first stint way back decade ago, which is crazy to think it was that long ago. This was all sort of kicking off.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if I saw any streams at the time. That would have been fairly early doors for that stuff, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, this was the point when PewDiePie was still sort of like the standout YouTuber that was kind of making and breaking records on a regular basis. And you think about that now, he's been relatively quiet as a sort of subject of news. I'm not saying his channel's gone quiet. I know he's still got a huge following, but he's not the newsworthy thing that he was all those years ago. And this would have been pre-Amazon's purchase of Twitch. Yeah. So this is going quite a way back now. So yeah.
Cool. Well, that's good to hear. So you're already a pro before you even started with me.
Definitely not.
And equipment-wise, that sounds kind of initially quite light as well as what you invested in.
Yeah, it was. And not much of that equipment was bought specifically for that hobby. So my Yeti had been bought because I was doing a bit of podcasting at the time. The webcam, I think I did buy that specifically for streaming, but it was useful for other purposes as well. The game capture card, obviously, I purchased, but the MacBook I already had. Games consoles I already had, and one thing we'll come on to shortly is our choice between console or PC streaming. I have always been console streaming.
Yeah.
So it's always been about capturing that external hardware rather than trying to build a rig that can kind of do it all. So I've always been connecting some sort of external games console to my PC for this purpose.
Yeah, interesting that, because we definitely have different approaches. you're on the console side, and I only really have one machine that I'm able to game and stream on. So I'm all PC in the whole thing. So, but I'm fortunate enough to have.
It's very worth calling out as well, though, between the two of us here. So you are comfortably more technical than me, and skilled when it comes to sort of proper PC development kind of level tech skills. My skills have always been sort of, I wouldn't call myself non-technical because that's probably do myself a disservice, but I would say I skim the surface of technical.
Yeah.
I can get technical enough to solve the problem that I've got, but I'm not interested enough in going any deeper. I just want to get to achieve the thing I'm trying to achieve, and then that's good enough for me. And then I move on to something else. So I kind of dip around. A deep generalist is the term I often describe it as. People will call me a jack of all trades. I would say deep generalist. I have intermediate skills in lots of different areas, but I'm not a specialist in any one. And I would say that's the same with PCs and sort of technical. To get into the real techie stuff, I'll only do it if I absolutely have to solve a specific problem.
Yeah,
then I'm out.
That's fair enough. Though I did find, so my experience recently, having not streamed before at all, and only starting really with you, is learning OBS was quite fun as a tool. It's OBS for the screen capture and the streaming it to Twitch, like setting up all the scenes. I mean, we also use it for the podcasting as well. So this scene, if you're watching us on YouTube, is set up on OBS as well, and all the screen transitions is all through OBS. Learning that as a tool, I thought was really fun and tickled my developer brain with the different things that you're able to do with it. So how did you get on with OBS originally? If you
fine. And like you, it's my kind of application, because it doesn't really require a huge amount of sort of coding skills. You can use that kind of skill set to do more, but to get what I wanted out of it, much like a sort of video editing tool or a Photoshop at the time, I was heavily into those kind of tools. From a creative perspective, it tickled my itch as well, but for different reasons. So I was fine with OBS. I quite enjoyed. And again, this is what kind of kept me in the loop for a short period. Once I'd managed to prove I could stream, I was adding overlays. I would sort of change some of the visuals. I would try different things. It sounds daft because a lot of this stuff's so easy now, because it's been baked in or made simpler by developers as this has all moved on. But even just things like getting alerts to fire was much more complicated. You had to custom build the artifact to get the alert into OBS in the first place. Now it's just baked in as an option. You can just pick it from an options menu, and it's very, very easy. So that was fun and a bit of a challenge as someone that, like I said, not overly technical. But yeah, I found it easy enough. And I will say, like I said, it's moved on hugely now, and there's different options which we can come on to in a minute. But it's much easier to get into, I think, if you're looking to set something up, in 2023.
Yeah, that's something I found quite interesting, is you don't have to have a lot really to set it up. And I say that, I was hoping, I suppose, on this episode to advocate for the cheap way of doing things. But then as I was making my notes, I recognized that the equipment I have, I bought incidentally. It wasn't for streaming. So for me, it was a fairly light investment to move on to streaming. But I recognize that not everyone has a particularly over-the-top gaming rig or professional audio equipment for any of the music recording I do as well. So I was fortunate enough to have some equipment already, but other things you can definitely go cheap on. For example, the camera that I use for both the podcast and for streaming is just my iPhone. There is an application you can get on iOS called Epoch Cam, or Epoch Cam Pro is the one I've got, so you don't get the adverts and you have a few more additional functionality. And you can plug it into your PC, your phone, and it acts as a webcam. And it's a far better webcam than the other one that I've got, which I think is actually the Logitech one that you mentioned before, which does not look good in this day and age, especially compared to yours. I know you've got a very good camera.
The problem you've got is you're constantly comparing your camera feed to mine, which
absolutely
on YouTube doesn't look too bad because Discord is heavily compressing my feed. But and to that point, though, I will say you're downplaying the quality of your camera. It's not just any iPhone. You are running the latest iPhone Pro.
Well, so actually, I'm not.
Are you not?
No, okay. This is alternative phone.
Oh, it's your burner phone.
It is my burner phone.
One
Yeah,
for your secret
yeah.
relationships.
Yeah. Oh, exactly.
Fair enough. Okay, well, that's interesting. But I mean, either way,
So it's an iPhone, I think 12, iPhone 12, but still
okay,
amazing
well, that's
camera.
not too bad. But it's not Pro then either, because that's where the camera quality really jumps. Yeah, it's a good point, and you definitely can get into this more cheaply. I mean, even your lighting compared to mine, your lighting setup is very different. You're using much more affordable lighting.
It's literally a lamp that has a flexible neck that I can point towards my face.
And I should point out that before I get into my setup and everyone goes, oh God, look at him spending all that money. This is stuff that I've amassed over a number of years, over a number of hobbies. So even the lights that are on me now, they're like reasonably affordable kind of Chinese knockoff studio lights. I think they're about £60 or £70 a light, and I've got two of them. They're on wall-mounted arms. They're not the best quality, but they do a job for this room. But they were originally bought for photography and videography. They weren't bought for this purpose. So I kind of repurposed them for this hobby. My main streaming setup, though, at my desk, which is not where I'm sat now, I've got two Elgato key lights. Now, those things are quite pricey per light, but you're paying to be in the Elgato ecosystem. You get the interoperability with things like the Stream Deck. And they're genuinely really good quality lights, incredibly bright, or can be high quality lights. So, again, they're the sort of thing that you upgrade to when you're either a bit like me and you just keep buying into these hobbies and not thinking about it, or I think you should start taking it more seriously.
Yeah.
And if I'm honest, I bought these early in lockdown, and they were incredibly useful, not just for my streaming aspirations, but also just for day-to-day use. I had them regularly on when I was, when I was working from home. So they were very, very useful and remain very, very useful for more than just a streaming hobby.
It's funny you mention the Elgato ecosystem, though. That is literally the Apple of the streaming world, isn't it? Because they have lots of different tools that work together. There's the lighting, the cameras, the Stream Deck. I was getting them mixed up.
They did a fantastic job of cornering that market fairly early on, and actually they made a killing during lockdown because a lot of this stuff became more useful for more people than just streamers, and they were there in an established brand, and you could buy into it. I mean, they've got a brilliant mic that I don't have. Haven't felt the need to upgrade. I've got the mic arm, their low profile mic arm, which is really good. Going to use that every day for work and for this kind of hobby. I've got the Stream Deck. I've got the key lights. I've got the built-in capture card. So I've got the 4K capture card, which I bought. I'll explain why I bought that in a moment. But I am sort of fairly heavily into the Elgato ecosystem at this point.
Yeah.
Although you'd be surprised how little some of it does play together. Like there's only a few things that really need to work together.
Yeah.
Everything else is just, it's got the logo on it, but they're kind of their own hardware, their own device. They don't have any real reason to kind of integrate.
Yeah.
Shall I just run you through what I'm running now? Would that be useful and kind of why I ended up buying it?
Yeah. You go through your stuff, and then I'll go through what currently.
Yeah, because yours is quite different to mine. So as I was saying to you off before we started recording, there was kind of a gap between that previous streaming attempt and then coming back to it. And that would have been probably 5 or 6 years. So it was, it would have been 6 years actually, because I basically moved house, a bit of life change, just kind of put it on hold. And then in lockdown, kind of came back round to the idea of not only streaming, but actually there was a number of hobbies I was exploring while we had a lot more downtime. I was looking into things like digital sort of sculpting, 3D modeling. I got back into physical model painting as a hobby, which I used to do. And I thought to myself, I'm gonna need to buy a new PC. I need to get back in the Windows ecosystem here to do a lot of this and do it well. So I, with the help of a colleague, spec'd out a sort of custom build. It wasn't designed for gaming, as you'll see from the graphics card. It's mid-level, very much mid-level, but it's quite beefy in other areas. So it's running now, and let me get these right. An AMD Ryzen 7 8-core processor, which Robbie's nodding along to because he understands what that means. I'm just telling you what my computer says I'm running. 32 gig of RAM and an M.2 drive. So the sort of core of the machine is all pretty quick. Graphics card is NVIDIA 2070.
Yep, RTX 2070.
Yeah, mid-level. It will run games, but it's not, it's not designed to, shoot the lights out and be super
2070
pretty.
is no slouch.
It was really bought. Well, it was really bought for video editing, and I was never really designed for gaming. This rig was designed for video editing and streaming primarily. So alongside that PC, I also bought the integrated Elgato 4K capture card. Two reasons. One, I was convinced that and probably wrongly, that the external USB device was inefficient because it was external, and I was restricted by USB speeds and things like that. But also, this was 2020. We knew there were new consoles coming. 4K had started to creep into the previous generation of games consoles, so I was future-proofing. Really, it was a matter of building something that I knew I wouldn't be upgrading in a few years' time because it was going to stand the test of time. I'm not in a position where I need to stream or capture above 4K anytime soon. Even when 8K comes along, I haven't got the hardware to see 8K yet, and that would be a massive investment in its own right. So, it was a sensible purchase.
Have you streamed 4K? I've only ever done 1080.
No, you can't. And it's not. So I can capture in 4K.
Yeah. And
use it for like videos on YouTube, etc. You can't stream to 4K because you're restricted by Twitch. So I think Twitch used to throttle you at 720. I think it throttles you at 1080 now.
Yeah.
I think if you make partner and you go up the levels with Twitch in terms of your affiliation, then I think you can unlock 4K, but I could be speaking out of turn.
No, fair. Won't be long now, I'm sure.
Yeah, it feels like it might be. And it's quite heavily throttled, so it's more for pass through, because if I don't have a 4K capture card, I can't pass 4K through the card, which means I would be restricted to what I could play on when I was streaming, which I don't want, because I want the best of what my console can do when I'm playing my limited 2 or 3 hours of gaming. If that makes sense. Yeah. So that was kind of the motivation. I don't use. I've got an Elgato Facecam, but I bought that more for my working setup. I use the camera I'm on now, which is a Canon. Oh God, what is it? Mirrorless M6 Mark II. There we go. It's a Canon M6 Mark II, which again can capture 4K, but I don't for this purpose. But I've also got on it a fixed, I think it's a 16mm Sigma lens, so you get a really nice kind of high quality depth of field. Yeah. So that's a really nice, and very much a kind of unnecessary high end addition, and that runs through the Elgato Camlink USB dongle.
That's why I feel like I have to compete, because literally next to your camera I look horrific. It's only a Discord is my saving grace.
If you watch us, I would argue if you watch our video feeds, there's probably not much in it.
Yeah. Again, Discord's just saving me there.
And I also dabbled with multicam setups. So I was very low fidelity here. I was using the C920. I've got a couple of C920s at this point. So I was using those on like little mounts and camera mounts that I'd got from my photography days to set up multiple camera angles around my desk when I was doing the model painting. That was quite a lot of fun. The problem with that is it was just, you ended up model painting in a field of wires, as everything was just, you were wrapped in this coil of streaming equipment. It was quite impractical or not a positive painting experience, but I got it all to work, and that was fine. I've also dabbled with green screens. I'm just kind of looking at my my notes to make sure I've covered the other stuff. And I've got a few different green screens, as you might imagine, from the photography and videography piece. But I also bought, because why not, the Elgato pop-up green screen. Again, great device. Just honestly a bit too big for where I game. Yeah. So getting it set up in the corner that I sit in is just not really practical, but it's useful for kind of other projects and video, and I could theoretically put it behind me now and teleport myself to somewhere different. But that's the kind of thing it's useful for. And then the other two things that I did, which were less to do with the hardware, was upgraded my ISP. So I'm on now about 30 meg up, I think, and 400 meg down. So that's more than enough for what I need it to do for streaming. And I switched when I came back to streaming from Core OBS to Streamlabs OBS. So Streamlabs are big in the kind of streaming space. They're the ones that pioneered a lot of the alerts, the donations, the kind of bits, and all the kind of stuff that you probably just take for granted now as being something that all streamers use. They pioneered that, and then they also took the Core OBS solution and they put like a Streamlabs wraparound. Yeah. And what it basically did was it made it a lot easier to set yourself up. So you'd launch the Streamlabs app, you'd log in with your Twitch account, that you pre-created or whatever you wanted to stream to, YouTube, etc. And then it would automatically configure everything for you. You didn't have to mess around with your stream key. You had to mess around setting up your scenes. You could import scenes pre-built, like the one we're using now. I imported it. Robbie had to custom build it from the ground up.
No, there were scripts to import it.
Yeah, but it just shortcuts for people that aren't that interested or find that more technically challenging. It streamlines a lot of that process for you.
Yeah.
Makes it a whole lot easier. But also, and I can't talk to all of the features here because I haven't seen your OBS. At some point we will. But I don't know to what degree some of the integrated features that my Streamlabs OBS now has with my streaming channel and everything else is above and beyond what you have, or whether they're core OBS features that just happen to be in my solution. So it's hard for me to say definitively what is different, other than I think the setup process is streamlined.
I suspect, because I think I saw it when I was visiting your studio. I saw what it looked like. My instinct is that the features are there in OBS, normal OBS, but they are not that easy to find and surfaced more easily in Streamlabs. It felt like it was more geared towards like a pickup and very quickly start streaming, and all the tools are already there for you. Whereas OBS is a bit of a tinkerer's tool. There's a lot you can do that's custom in there, but equally it takes a bit longer to get things set up the way you'd like to do it, just because there is so much you can do.
And I think it's fair to say, like, OBS is not just used for streaming. So a lot of OBS is used for a lot of television production, or big streaming channels use it for various things. It's
YouTube
not
videos as well, just to capture
large studio environments. People use it for like web conferences and stuff like that. So you wouldn't necessarily want the Streamlabs version unless you were specifically using it for streaming.
Yeah.
But if you are using for streaming, I would make the argument that it's probably easier for a novice to get going without the need to sort of spend as much time as it takes to learn your way through the whole system, because a lot of the work is done for you just to connect your Twitch account with your OBS and get you up and running. You still have to work out how to add objects to your scene and configure your scenes, but it gets you through some of that messing around in the menu, in the options menus.
Yeah.
And to be honest, it wasn't that complicated when I did it before. This just made it frictionless and just much, much faster for someone who hasn't got the time like me to want to sit there and tinker. So that was kind of how I brought my stream up to date. And now, to be honest, I've dabbled a bit with the backgrounds. So I'm sort of put lights in my office, things like that, but they're not really specific to the streaming setup. It's more about trying to create the scenes and the backgrounds that make your stream engaging. But like I said, other than that, I don't really do a lot with my setup now. Most of this equipment just looks after itself. I bought a new mixer for the podcast so I could use better microphones. I don't know if that's coming through in the quality. You tell us, listeners, if we're getting that right or not. But from a pure streaming perspective, I guess you probably would class my setup as pro level now, even though I am far from a pro streamer, and you've only got to watch some of our Twitch streams to know that.
Yeah, the incidental equipment, I think, is a big part of that. But yeah, that's really interesting. We definitely have different takes, I think, when it comes to some of the software that we have and some of the investments in it. And that's probably because I'm very early in my experience with it. So why don't I talk about my setup, what I've got in terms of equipment, what software I use. You mentioned already OBS, but I can tell you all the pitfalls I've had with using that and the struggles I've had. But starting with the PC, so I stream only on PC. I don't have a console, so I don't have a capture card. So for anyone who incidentally does have a pretty powerful gaming rig already, it's a easier way to get started than having to purchase a capture card, say if you're planning to do it by console. Not super expensive, obviously, getting a capture card, but I was able to set up and start streaming without anything, without buying anything extra, basically. So my PC setup, I bought it last year, so it's got fairly new tech in there. I've got a RTX 3080 Ti, which is a pretty beefy graphics card, way over the top, I think, for what I'm using it for, but it runs really well eventually anyway, once you tweak some of the settings. I've got a 12700K Intel. I can't remember how many cores it is. I think I tried to count it earlier. It was like 20.
You gave me grief for not coming on here prepared with my own PC spec, and you can't tell me how many cores your processor has.
A lot.
Robbie.
A lot of cores.
Come on.
A lot of cores. Well, I wasn't
cores.
expecting you to count the cores.
It just says 8 cores. That's what my system says. It's not. I didn't sit there and count them. It just told me.
Yeah,
8.
I think I went to the wrong place to count them. But yeah, it's a powerful CPU, but it's not like a CPU, like a stupidly powerful CPU. It's an i7, so not an i9. It's not ridiculously powerful, but it is fairly substantial for this rig. Perfect for gaming. I do obviously my music recording on here as well, so it handles that quite well. And the RAM is 32 gigabytes as well, but it's DDR5, so it's very quick. It's the latest generation of the that type of RAM, so it's very, very quick and future-proofing it for upgrades in the future. I've got 2 more slots that I can fill, so if I do need some more RAM in the future, I've got room to expand. So that's the PC. I don't have a capture card in there or anything, as I say, because I don't have a console. So that is my main gaming and streaming setup. It's all done through the same machine. And in terms of cameras, as I mentioned before, I use my iPhone 12, my burner phone, though not really a burner phone. It's using Epoch Cam as the app, and I think that's what it's called on the PC. There's a corresponding PC app that you need to get when you have it on your phone, and when you plug it in, it connects to your phone. You can either do it through Wi-Fi or you can do it through plugging it in. I find for stability reasons it's better to plug it in. One thing to note though is that it does virtualize the camera, so it takes up a little bit of resources on your PC. One thing to note when you're trying to save some frames for the streaming is I found it has a bit of an impact. So I think my next investment will actually be a better webcam. I'm likely going to go for the Elgato Facecam. I've done a bunch of research on it and it seems to be the best option at the moment. But for now, sticking with the iPhone, and the camera looks good. It looks perfectly fine. In fact, it might even look better than the Elgato Facecam. I don't even know. But it's more the resources that it soaks up in your PC when you're trying to game and stream at the same time.
Well, and just to that point, the reality is, however good you think it looks, it doesn't need to look amazing, because 99% of the time you're compressed to this tiny little pixel arrangement in the bottom right-hand corner. So, yeah, if you're doing it like this, then you want a better camera. But to be honest, just you can get a lot of benefit from just some decent lighting.
True.
And I'm just going to mention this very briefly before you carry on with your setup, because I know you're going to come on to your lighting in a minute. The reason that mine is possibly considered a bit overkill, I know you might go there with your commentary on my setup. As someone who's focused on photography and videography, that the visual, the image, is much more important to me, or has been, than the tech. So I focus probably more. You
shock me with your background, Jay, that you're interested in the image.
I focus more on the visual, probably than you need to, especially for a stream. Like I said, if you're going to be tucked in a corner, as long as you're not too blown out, one decent light's probably enough. But that's something that I've always sort of strived for, is that sort of higher production value video quality, because that's, prior to streaming, been a hobby. So I just wanted to call that out. It's probably linked to other interests rather than a specific requirement to get into this kind of stuff.
Yeah. And to absolutely contrast with that investment in the lighting, my lighting setup is I mentioned it before, is just simply a lamp that's on like a kind of snake neck thing that you can bend around and move it. It does have a few settings when it comes to the lighting warmth and the lighting brightness, but it's not supposed to be for a studio setup lighting. It's more for lighting your desk as you're trying to take notes, which is what I originally bought it for. It just so happens that I could face it towards me, make it a bit warmer, and adjust the brightness to not overblow my face. But yeah, fairly simple lighting setup. And a few tips from Jay on alternative lighting. So background light was originally facing towards the camera, which was a terrible idea, especially when you're trying to you capture your face. But also I have a second light over here, which is also another desk light. It's not a snake light arm, but it's one that can lift up. And Jay said a while ago that if you have a light that's kind of lighting the side to the back of your head and one lighting the front, it's apparently supposed to look good. So I'll leave that up to the viewers whether it looks half decent at all.
There's a whole, you can get fairly affordable books on this sort of stuff in terms of studio lighting setups and how you achieve different looks. But yeah, I mean, in principle, it's like a 2-point. You want a two-point light, 2 lights in front of you, ideally one on either side for even lighting, and then one behind. It's called a hair light, which is ironic given I have no hair, but it's basically there to catch on the back of your head to separate you from your background.
Yeah.
But as a whole, we could do lighting theory another time.
Well, you'd have to lead on that episode for sure. Those tips.
I am professional. I am not a professional.
I couldn't even tell you if that made a difference for me. So I'm just doing what you said. So I guess it works.
I told you need RGBs. That's what your background's missing now.
It is. I have a very minimalist background.
You need RGB lights.
So yeah, my background is not decorative at all. In contrast to yours, with all your different gadgets and your gaming and your models in the background, mine is a very studio background. I have acoustic foam lining the walls almost everywhere, and I have various guitars and electric drum kits in the background to make me look like I'm more competent than I am at music. In terms of other stuff, what else have I got? Audio. That's the main thing.
I was going to say, have you touched on your microphone? Because that's probably where you're not quite as entry level as your setup's been made out to be.
So a bit like you in terms of incidental equipment that I bought for other hobbies. I record and produce music as a hobby on the side, and so I've over the years invested in quite a few different audio equipment. One of them is a recent purchase, which is this microphone and boom arm, and I've had an interface as well for a while. I know you've just got one to plug it into the PC to capture the audio as well. And this is, so the microphone is a Rode oh god, I should remember it now.
To
NT1A, Rode NT1A, and it came with the foam and the boom arm and a very long XLR cable. And the capture device I've got, the interface is a Focusrite 4i4, which I use for both the microphone and all my guitars and anything else I need to capture over jack or XLR. So yes, audio, I've definitely got a bit more than probably the average Joe. So I was fortunate enough that the audio is probably better than I would need for the streams, just like your lighting. But because I was originally, in my notes I was thinking I'll advocate for the relatively cheap setup, and it's only cheap for me because I haven't invested in much specifically for streaming. But yeah, the audio is probably up there, and headphones as well. They're not necessary really for streaming, I guess, but they do help isolate the noise so you don't capture any of the game accidentally through the mic.
They're not necessary or essential, but they are probably one of the most accessible and the easiest ways to improve the audio quality of your stream, because as I've experienced before and suffered multiple times, even recently cocking up with my audio, having audio playing into the room when you're trying to capture audio through a mic and be very specific about what you want capturing is really problematic. Whereas if you can feed it through your headphones, and of course with things like OBS, you can monitor the audio, which allows you to basically, with a slight delay, for those who don't know what it means, because I didn't know when I first started this journey what monitoring audio meant. It allows you to push all of the audio that's been captured into the stream, or select audio channels and hear what exactly is coming through to the stream. Yeah, because that's a really challenging part of this. So I actually think, although not essential, probably most people have got them, some sort of headphones. If you can force the noise from your capturing device, your PC, into your headphones rather than into the room around you, you're going to get a better quality feed. Yeah. In terms of your microphone.
Makes you a better gamer as well. Everyone knows that. You can hear everything around you.
Well, I was going to say, and this is we hadn't prepared this, and is there anything else you wanted to cover with your setup before you get into? Because I know you had some challenges that you've overcome.
I did. I was going to chat about OBS.
Yeah, do that first, because then what I'd like to do, just remind me before we finish, I would quite like us to have a crack at, well, what would the sort of the simplest, reasonable in terms of affordability setup possibly be? Yeah. If we stripped away some of what makes our setups a little more expensive, just so that if people are thinking about it, you could almost consider what's the kind of entry level that you need to do something like this. Yeah, but absolutely. You do the OBS stuff, because I know you had some challenges there.
Yes, so OBS, we just mentioned before, Jay uses Streamlabs, I use OBS. This is the capture software for capturing the games, capturing your camera, and then feeding it through to any streaming service. So I think it's Twitch, YouTube, or Facebook, I think is the other one.
There's a third one, a fourth one now. I want to say it's something like King or something weird. That's just kind of, people are talking about it. I've noticed on Twitter, but it's one of those, it's better than Twitch. But then all the Twitch streamers are going, yeah,
they always say that.
So was Mixer, until Microsoft folded it into Facebook and made all of those people with a Mixer account ultimately have to switch to an entirely different audience and platform. So, there's an argument for betting where the bigger money is. It depends what you're looking for, doesn't it?
I mean, Twitch is owned by Amazon, so they're not short of money.
They're not, but it's oversaturated. That's the problem. I think that they're saying to be spotted and to get found, it's much harder on Twitch because there's so many more people and so many really established streamers. Whereas if you go somewhere more startup-y, there's less people, you've got more chance of being seen. And there's pros and cons.
Maybe that's a future topic idea we can chat about then, the different streaming services. I've not really delved into that. But yeah, so you can log in directly through Twitch in OBS, and it connects it automatically. No messing around with the stream key anymore. So which is quite cool.
That's the case with OBS now. No stream key anymore.
I think that's a fairly recent thing though, because I remember originally having to put it in, then fairly recently just logging in. So I think it's a recent update from what I've seen anyway. But yes, OBS has definitely got a lot more settings than the average Joe will need. So there's a lot that you can toggle, turn on and off. And what I found is straight out the box, there are performance issues that I hit almost immediately. And I had to spend quite a long time, and only fairly recently. I've been streaming for the better half of 3 months now, since the beginning of the year, basically. And yeah, I've only just figured out how to properly stream through OBS and toggle the settings. And some of it was definitely my fault, but some of it was some OBS weirdness. So, for example, this scene that you see, if you're watching on YouTube, you're seeing a scene of us two in separate camera feeds, and we also have a background video that is moving. Now, if I switched from this scene to a different scene, the assets in this scene will still run. So the videos assets that are, lighting around our names below, running the background, they by default still run. So the main thing that I had to toggle to improve my performance was to go through every single asset in every single scene and toggle an option to turn it off when I'm not viewing that scene. And it seems like a bit of an obvious one that should be turned off automatically, but it made a huge difference for me. The other thing was, as I was initially capturing my entire desktop, my entire window, instead of an individual game, and only recently discovered that is a big no-no when it comes to streaming. So if you are going to stream, capture the actual game window as opposed to the entire display, and that definitely saves some resources. I mentioned before as well the fact that I'm using a kind of a virtual camera instead of a proper hardware camera has a bit of an impact. But for me personally now, the stream is well set up to stream most games. Originally, I was having to drop to the lowest settings on pretty much every game I was trying, and some games just I wouldn't even be able to start at all. So it's definitely improved.
Do you think, and this isn't a challenge in terms of the setup because we've got very different approaches, do you think if you, and I always struggle with where the processing power goes, if you didn't have 3080 and you had, let's say, my 2070, do you still think you'd be able to achieve the experience you've now achieved through the optimizations that you've put in place? Or do you think that your graphics card kind of compensates for maybe some of that power hungriness that streaming and gaming on the same device inevitably brings?
It's a hard one to answer. I do think there will be an impact, obviously, not having a 3080, I say a 2070, but people do it. People definitely do it, which is why I was confused when I was having so many performance issues. I was like, people have, not as powerful PCs as mine, but still able to run games at 60 frames per second, 1080p, at relatively decent graphics. So I'm definitely doing something wrong. And after lots of research, turns out I was. How far that can go in terms of hardware, I'm not really sure, but people definitely do it. 2070s, I'm sure people will stream with that. Just knock down your graphics performance on the game specifically. Another thing is cap the FPS, because even if you haven't got a high refresh rate screen, which I do, but for streaming, you cap the game at 60 frames because OBS has to process all of the frames that you're pushing out, regardless of whether you're actually pushing that to Twitch. It's going to capture all those frames, which means it's got loads of processing that it needs to do. So yeah,
I do remember back in the early days, when in my 2013, 2014 days, having to do things like matching the camera frame rate to the game and all sorts of stuff like that, because it was, you couldn't do 60 FPS back then, not easily, and you couldn't do 1080p because Twitch wouldn't let you show it anyway. So there's a lot of sort of toggling things down to the level that Twitch was going to accept, just to keep things simple for your PC, and like you said, not overcomplicate the encoding. And you're obviously, I would say you're very much in that sort of more technical camp, and even in that, it's taken a bit of time to refine that setup.
Yeah,
and I think that's something that people should go into this expecting. Like, it's not, if you don't get that first stream bang on, or it's complicated on the first attempt, just do it. Just get out there and start streaming. Don't worry about absolute perfection. You can change it. You can tweak it. I mean, the reality is we're 3 months in and we still only get about 4 or 5 viewers every stream, and they're the same people, and we're slowly, very slowly building a community. Come and join us. We try and Twitch stream Sundays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays. Come and follow us. But in all seriousness, it takes time, like, to get that kind of traffic, to get the kind of the user base that you want, and in that time, just enjoy the experience of playing the games. Enjoy the broadcasting. Try and practice talking to no one. That's hard, I will be honest. Talking when there's nothing to talk to or no one to interact with. But practice that, and you can do it in the comfort of knowing that no one's watching, probably, or very few people are watching. And then you can kind of build on these things, tweak them, and learn over time. But I would absolutely say get in at that base level and do it cheaply, because we, like I said, neither of our setups were cheap or are cheap. But when we started with broadly what we had, with a relatively small investment.
Yeah,
I made a bit more of one than you did at the very start, but not really much more than buying a capture card. Everything else I broadly had already, and build up over time, either as your funds allow or your audience demands, or both. See how things go, because you could end up spending a fortune getting all the stuff that we've just gone through, and then find that it's not for you, or after a couple of months of trying, you just get bored, or you don't get the uptake, and then you've got all this kit you've either got to sell or find an alternative purpose for. So that would be my sort of thoughts on it. But I don't know what your thoughts are, Robbie, as a 3-monther.
No, I'd agree. I completely agree with that. Start slow, start small, and grow from there. And with that, should we wrap up with our recommendations for equipment for super early streaming and super low investment, as neither of us are representing that kind of camp?
I think that makes sense. I will stop short of calling them specific recommendations. I'm not going to give you links to search. Maybe Robbie will, because I don't know what the latest versions of this stuff is. But I'll give you my take, Robbie. You tell me how you would differ this, because our setups are different, so we might have different views. So PC or Mac, probably these days either one's going to work for you. But if you've already got a PC or a Mac and it's powerful enough to run a stream, don't go out and buy a brand new PC. But you'll know the spec of your machine, but you're going to need one or the other. If you haven't got either, I'd probably start with a PC, purely and simply because it's more flexible, cheaper, and it's going to be easier to upgrade over time. I'd probably go, for me, with an external capture card, assuming you've already got a gaming device. If you're on consoles, if you're a PC gamer, then you're probably already rocking a very good PC and you're already better set up for this. But if you are a console gamer wanting to get into this space, probably go with a capture card. I will say, I think some consoles do. I don't know if some of the Xbox, and certainly there was a time where Xbox and PlayStation could stream directly from the console, but it's not really the experience that's going to get you set up as a streamer, because you can't control the inputs, the overlays. You can't bring camera feeds in. So I'd go capture card. Webcam, you're going to need something, but you don't have to spend a lot. And actually, if you get a reasonable webcam that's got a microphone input, again, it's not going to be the best audio, but it's going to be quick, easy to set up, and probably save you a few pounds in the short term while you decide what the best investment for a microphone is. And you can sit more freely and just play. Beyond that, I think that's probably it. I would go with Streamlabs, and I'll tell you why. And I don't know if Robbie's aware of this. We've talked about Stream Deck, or very briefly I touched on the Stream Deck. I didn't go into detail earlier. There's an app version of Stream Deck that Elgato do, but I think you have to have some sort of a subscription or a product already in place. That was, Robbie, your feedback. Streamlabs have an app for the Streamlabs version of OBS, which gives you some of the functionality of a Stream Deck. So if you've got a mobile phone, theoretically you can download the Streamlabs app and you can do some scene switching and some basic controls through that app, and it's free as long as you've got a Streamlabs account. I think that's probably all there is really to it as a starter for 10 is some sort of camera and microphone combined if you can, some way to capture your game, and then one of the OBS solutions.
Yeah.
I think there's much else. You don't need the lights. You've probably got a lamp,
like me.
Or just put the room light on. It doesn't. You don't have to be perfectly illuminated to start this journey, and then see what kind of uptake you get. What would you do differently, and would you advocate for PC over capture card as a newbie? Where would you go?
I do think overall a PC is probably more expensive as a setup, because in order to run the game and the streaming, you have to have a pretty beefy PC. So I would probably, assuming that the person who's starting already has a console or something that they can use to start gaming, even if it's a gaming PC and it's not that powerful, I've heard people who get a 2 PC setup for streaming. So they have one PC that plays the games and one PC that picks up the stream and records the stream. So that's always an option as well. But the simplicity of one PC means that you don't have to have things like capture cards, and it is kind of an all-in-one thing. It's all done in one software. You connect to one device, one screen. But I think you're bang on with your setup. The only thing I would suggest is you don't necessarily need a camera. I've definitely seen plenty of streams that don't have a camera, and you can even do things like virtual avatars that respond to audio, so that you could have that's probably a bit on the more technical side if anybody fancies delving into that, but you could just have a cartoon character that looks like you that's speaking when it receives the audio. So you definitely need an audio device, but you don't necessarily need a video device. So that's something that you could even save on there.
And actually, one videographer tip, and this is not my take, this is kind of an industry recognized take when it comes to producing video of any kind, is that audiences are more tolerant of kind of lower quality video if the audio is good.
Yeah.
You can have the best video in the world, but if the audio is bad, people find it really jarring and off-putting. So definitely focus your attention. If you've got the game console already and you've got the capture card, as Robbie says, you don't need your face on stream. And even if it is on stream, low fidelity, low quality is probably fine. You're shoved in a corner.
Yeah.
What's important is your voice, because that's what people are tuning into. They're probably not tuning in to watch the actual game you're playing. Theoretically, they could watch that many times over from other streamers. It's your personality to you they're coming to see or hear. So I think, a good quality microphone or whatever your audio device is, keep that audio as good as you can get it. So we mentioned earlier, put your headphones in. Don't let your PC audio, your game audio pump into your room and create background noise. Try and control those things, and that'll give you the best possible sort of audio output as you start your journey. The rest you can invest in over time and build up as you get more into it.
Absolutely. And I think that's it. I think that's where we'll leave it today. So that's our streaming setup. Do check us out on Twitch, and chat to us about our equipment. If you have any questions on what we've chatted about today as well, it's a good forum to go in and speak to us. But yeah, that's all we have for this episode today. Thanks for hanging out with us. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube and all good podcasting services, so you don't miss an episode. And you can check us out on Twitch, where we stream roughly 3 times a week: Sundays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays, doing a variety of games. What did we start recently? We've been doing some Fortnite, but we started Grounded
again for a change. Grounded, we started recently.
Grounded, that's been a lot of fun. We're gonna get back to
WWE 2K23.
WWE,
so yeah, we
and I started playing Control as well, actually. So a few games to play.
Yes, that looked really good. Yeah,
Great. Well, thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.